Good morning, everyone. My name is Bradley Garcia. So I've recently decided that I'm going to start doing my own media content, and really with the purpose of these videos that I will be coming out with, it's just like a history of Lubbock and Lubbock music. I just feel like there's a lot of stories that a lot of people here in the West Texas area don't know about, and I feel like need to know about. So that's the purpose of what I'm doing here. We are on our way to Littlefield, Texas, a town northwest of Lubbock, Texas, where I'm from, and we are going to speak with James Jennings, who is the brother of Waylon Jennings. He owns a liquor store called Waymore's Liquor Store, and we're just gonna go see if we can talk to him, talk about Waylon's legacy, talk about Littlefield, and just certain stories that, you know, maybe he wants to talk about. Don't really know what I'm doing, but let's just see how it turns out. Let's wish me luck. All right, so we're here at Waymore's Liquor Store here in Littlefield, Texas. James Jennings, nice to meet you.
Well, same here. Thank you.
My name is Bradley Garcia. Thank you for taking the time to answer some of my questions.
You're welcome.
I just kind of want to ask, you know, you're one out of four brothers, right? You're the third.
Yeah.
Correct, right? Well, me and myself, I'm the third out of four brothers. So I just wanted to ask, you know, growing up, when Waylon being such an icon, was there any brotherly pressure that went with that? Was there any competition?
No.
Because, you know, with me and
Waylon was 8 years older than I was. Well, part of the year he was 9, part of the year he was 8, and Tommy, that brother just under Waylon, they were 2 years apart between them.
Okay.
And I was, of course, 7 years under Tommy and 8 part of the time. And then I was 7 years older than my youngest brother.
Okay.
My mom and dad, they scattered us that way so they'd have that cheap labor.
That's how it was back then, I guess. Yeah. Well, yeah, you know, you growing up during that time, you know, Waylon in the 50s, you know, he was doing so much at that time. He was a DJ for KLLL.
Yeah, he was. Well, he started out here at KBOW in Littlefield. He got fired out there.
So he got fired for playing Little Richard records. Is
No,
that correct?
brown-eyed handsome man. What?
Chuck Berry, I believe.
Berry.
Yeah.
Chuck
Okay.
Berry, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that's probably one of my favorite stories. You know, because I went to Texas Tech, so I did the radio out there at KTXT. So that was always my favorite story, because, you know, knowing Waylon from the very get-go, he was very.
Well, you know what that song's about, don't you?
I guess I never really looked into it.
Well, we were dirt poor people growing up ourselves. And you walking around on this side of town, we lived over the other way on Austin Avenue.
Okay.
And the laws would pull up beside you and ask you what you're doing, of course. And you say walking around, they say, well, where do you live at? And you tell them, well, they say, well, why don't you get back over there where you live and walk around?
Man.
Because they figure you over here trying to steal something.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, they had a law back then. A black guy could be walking and they could stop him, and if he didn't have a job, they'd ask him if he had a job, and if he'd had, they could lock him up for a week or two. And that was kind of a way of telling them, if you're in the wrong part of town walking around, don't come back to this part of town if you don't have a job. That's called vagrancy. So the first line of the song, he said he was arrested on the charges of being unemployed, and he was sitting in the witness stand. Well, you know who that is. Well, in the 50s and 40s, they wasn't nothing but white judges in this whole country. It's all white. Well, the judge's wife called up the district attorney and said, you better free that brown-eyed man if you want your job. You better free that brown-eyed man. Well, that tells you that the white lady was going out with the black guy that was on trial. See, well, everybody figured that out, and everybody was getting a laugh about it, you know. Well, Waylon was playing it out there at the radio station, KBOW. Was the was a drugstore. It's a long story. I'm getting it. There was a drugstore downtown where nearly all the people that had businesses downtown, the men would come down to the drugstore and they drank their coffee and talk and visit. And they had, of course, the radio on, and it was on KBOW Littlefield.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they'd hear that song, and they knew what it was about, and they didn't like it being played.
You know,
on the radio.
I guess I didn't realize that's what that song was about. You know,
and then Waylon, Mac Shannon on the radio station, them guys that he went to drink coffee with told us to tell him to quit playing that song. So Mac Shannon goes out to the radio station, which is about 2 miles out there from downtown, and tells Waylon, don't be playing that song no more. And so they kind of got in a little argument about it. Waylon was laughing, said it was a good song. Anyway, he said, well, if you play it anymore, I'm going to fire you. So Mac Shannon leaves and goes back downtown to drink his coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Waylon gives him about time to get on back down to the drugstore to drink his coffee, and he starts playing Brown Eyed Handsome Man. Well, he goes right back out there and fires Waylon.
And so, from the very get-go, he had the outlaw attitude, huh?
Well, of course, that... Well, I don't know whether... Well, I guess they call it outlaw, you know, but you're going to do stuff like you see to do it.
Was it an outlaw attitude or was it a Jennings attitude?
Well, I don't know. It might have been starvation. I don't know. Well, a farmer over there, Corbin, and he sold his farm and he bought KAAL in Lubbock, the radio station. He had 3 boys. There was Guy, Larry, and Ray Corbin were their names. Anyway, they had heard Waylon disc jockeying over here at Levelland. But when they got into Lubbock, they hired Waylon to come to Lubbock to be a disc jockey at KAAL. Well, then Ray Corbin, he picked and sang too. And Waylon, well, they would open shows for like George Jones, Farron Young back in the 50s at the Coliseum. They wasn't, I mean, at the auditorium, there wasn't no Coliseum at the time. And they would bring them different acts in there, and they'd open shows for them. Well, then Waylon and Buddy Holly and Sonny Curtis and Don Bowman, a bunch of guys over there got, and what I'm telling you is, I wasn't over at KAAL or none of those places, but Waylon come home and be a talking. And they did a lot of time eat supper with us, him and his wife and the kids come over, and Waylon would sit and talk and tell them, and you know, and of course hearing it on the radio and hearing him talk and going on. Well, that's what from my memory of him telling me and stuff that was going on.
And as a brother, that was you. Would you say you were pretty proud of your brother at that time too?
Lord, yeah, man.
Man,
when you're dirt poor people like we was, and somebody's doing something, you really get a, you know.
Yes, sir.
But it like I say, he had a radio program when he was 12 years old.
Yes, sir.
At the radio station on Sunday evening.
Well, you know, like, so do you have memories of Buddy Holly? Like,
I never met Buddy.
You never met Buddy.
No, I just remember Waylon talking. Like I told you, I remember Waylon talking about Buddy Holly, and of course we'd go when he'd open shows at the auditorium. We'd go, me and Mom and Daddy and my younger brother Bo. We'd go to the shows over there. To, you know, of course Waylon was opening the shows. But Waylon, I remember Waylon coming in and telling him he was quitting KAAL and going to go on that tour with Buddy. Buddy'd asked him to go on a tour, and my mom and them, they was kind of worried about him quitting his job to go off, because he said tour, and you know he had explained to them what a tour was, you know.
Yes, sir.
Going on a tour, but anyway, they wasn't too proud of him quitting a job to go off to do something else, you know, because he was going to be up in New York and places, you know.
And when he went on that tour, and y'all received the word that Buddy Holly had passed away in a plane crash. I mean, I don't know if you remember, you know. I
can remember this. I remember coming home, and they had already found out that Waylon wasn't on the plane.
Okay.
But my brother Tommy, the one that was 2 years under Waylon, he was at a cafe drinking coffee, and a guy come in and asked him had he heard, and they were saying it first on the radio because it was Buddy and Tommy Alsop and Waylon Jennings in the pilot course was killed in a plane crash. And he had told Waylon, Tommy got in the car and took off to our house over on 6th Street. And when he got there, Maxine, that's Waylon's wife, her mama, was on the phone talking to Waylon. Waylon had just found it out himself and called back to home and was talking to my mama or Maxine, and Tommy come in to tell him what he thought was the bad news. And she said, no, we're talking to him on the telephone.
Oh, wow.
He didn't get on the plane.
So the story goes, supposedly, I guess with contracts and the way the music industry was, he still had to perform.
Yeah, they had to go
name.
on to finish up their tour to get their money.
So it was said that he wasn't able to make Buddy's funeral, but were y'all able to go to the funeral?
No, we didn't go.
Okay. It's interesting to see how close home those stories are to hear here in West Texas. And you always hear about these stories, and it's kind of rare that you get to talk to people who.
Well, that's what I tell people. All this stuff like I got back here, it's just from being around somebody. Like I say, Waylon started out at our house. You had to move a guitar to sit down. Because it was my daddy picked and sang. My daddy played old country dances years way back. Yeah. And my mama would sit there and pick and sing. And Tommy, he picked it up. I never had an interest in my younger brother either. We was always real hyper. You got to have patience to sit down and pick a guitar.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, as the Jennings as a family, I mean, would you say a majority of y'all were musical, or it was just a select few?
Well, I love music. Oh God, yeah, man.
Yes, sir.
I like to beat on the drum, beat on boxes, don't beat on the dash and pick up.
Yes, sir. Well, I guess
my brother Bo, he was that same way. But Tommy, he picked it up, and he got drafted in the Army, and Waylon was out in Arizona. Like I say, in '58, he went to Arizona and went to work at KCKY in Coolidge, Arizona. And there was an old bar out there called Galloping Goose. And he would go down there at night and pick and sing. And Tommy come in out of the Army, and by that time Waylon had moved up to JD's in Phoenix or Scottsdale, wherever. Anyway, he called Tommy, and Tommy was working out here at the bowling alley, and told him, said, why don't you come out here? Said, you get a job out here. And so he got his wife and Francis, and I think they had their first kid. Anyway, they went out to Arizona, and then he went to picking bass for Waylon, and then wound up with old Jerry Gropp and Ed. I can't remember his last name, but they started out with Waylon. They were both left-handed pickers. They did bass, and Jerry he would that acoustic guitar and pick and sang in rhythm with Waylon, and they went off on their first tour in a 1956 Chevrolet car.
Just a small car. That's all.
No, this is true. It's crazy, but Waylon, he was getting pretty popular out there in Arizona, and so he called some places he knew. I think over in Show Lower and Grants, and over here at Portales, and then Clovis, and then he came to Lubbock, and then Big Springs, and Lord, I can't remember, back over to Demings, and anyway, they wound up back in Tucson, and then straight back into Phoenix, and I was in a '56 Chevrolet. Ed, the car belonged to Ed.
No AC either, huh?
Lord, no. Them three guys sat in the front seat, and all their instruments and clothes and stuff was in the trunk in the back seat. And that car that he had with the '56 Chevrolet, and Ed, he was a mechanic out there too, and he had to put a 327 motor in that '56 Chevy. It had 3 deuce carburetors on it because he was drag racing with it. Had a 4-speed. And anyway, they had, Waylon said they had to disconnect two of them carburetors because they couldn't get from town to they drank so much gas.
Oh man.
But anyway, that's what they went on their first tour in the 56 Silver.
You know, within the timeline, Waylon Fest, that used to take place here in Littlefield,
Yeah.
right? How crazy were those times when Waylon Fest was going around here?
Oh man, it was something here. I guarantee you. He came in, did a show out here. We put a stage together out here about a football field, and he enjoyed himself real well. And anyway, he decided he'd come back, you know, in the summertime, and so he did. And then he brought, he did a couple of shows, and then he brought Willie came with him. And Lord have mercy, when it was Waylon and Willie, you couldn't get up and down the streets. People were camping in the alleys. They were parking everywhere.
Oh man,
it was full of people, I guarantee you.
And how come that never continued? Was it more of
I don't know. You know, things like that got a way of wearing out, and they just did.
So a lot of interesting people came through here when all that was going on.
Oh, God, yeah, Lord, yeah.
You know,
they still are.
Yeah.
That old Charlie Crockett here about a month ago or two. In fact, he does a song. You can see it on the telephone there. Solitary Road.
Yes, sir.
And when they brought him a '63 El Camino pickup to drive, and unloaded it off a trailer. Well, he drives around town, and they're filming him driving up and down some of the streets in Main Street, Littlefield. And then he comes back to the store here and ends his song out there standing in the driveway looking at that Waymore sign.
Yeah, so I was actually an extra in that film. He did some filming at the Blue Light in Lubbock.
Was Jesse there with him?
Jesse Coulter?
She flew in.
I'm not sure. I wasn't there when she was there.
Yeah.
But yeah, he got to do a performance for 30 minutes. And so we got to be some extras in the background.
They filmed about half a day with that El Camino.
Yeah, he did a music video in downtown Lubbock. I think it's called.
He got a unique voice, you know. He's a good guy.
I got to meet him actually.
He's kin to David Crockett.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Yeah.
That's what I asked him. We come in, we were talking. I said, they told me he's kin to David Crockett. He said, I sure am. And I said, well, you can go to hell. I'm going to Texas. He laughed. He said, he really did say that.
Yeah. But yeah,
he's a nice guy. He really is.
Yeah, I love big Charlie Crockett fan. You know, he's another one too that, you know, he keeps that legend, you know, alive. He was recently on. I don't know if you know who this is, but have you heard of Joe Rogan? He's a big podcaster in the world. He's out in Austin, and Charlie Crockett was on there. He actually mentions your liquor store.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So. The number one podcast.
Waymore?
Yes, sir. So Charlie actually talks about it. He had said something great on the podcast saying about Lubbock. Like in this area, it's harsh over here, but it's harsh. But you know, Lubbock's probably the best place to perform. This area in general, it's the best place to perform. You know, music wise. But I just thought it was cool that he mentioned Littlefield, you know, on the world's biggest podcast.
Yeah. I like talking to him. He's a nice guy.
Why stay in Littlefield? Like, growing up, did you ever want to leave Littlefield? Like, have you been?
I lived in Nashville 2 different times.
Okay.
Way back, and but that's what I was telling Tommy, my brother Tommy. He's trying to get me to. That's before I was married. I lived there. I'd go out there and stay, and I just all over everywhere at the time when you're single, you know, running around. But anyway, I come back out here and I said, I'm going back to Texas. He said, well, don't you like it out here? He said, won't you move out here to Nashville? I said, no. I said, everywhere you go is uphill, downhill, around the corner.
It's Appalachia.
They had a straight road. And there's 3 different bridges you got to get on to get from one side of Nashville to the other side. You can't just, you know.
Yeah, there's a...
I mean, it's pretty up there and all, but I like it where I can see where I'm going and out on the plains, you know. I guess if dirt gets in your system and you can't get it out.
Yes, sir. Waylon had a quote he did for Texas Monthly. He said that at the time in his living room, he had a Texas flag that was hung upside down, and it wasn't that he didn't like Texas. It just meant that he didn't want to live in West Texas anymore.
Well, he got that song Six Strings Away. I got I said, how does that go? I got a new Rolls Royce tailor-made clothes and how long does the good times last? Is it hard time days and poor boy ways just 6 strings away? In other words, if you ain't got that guitar, you out here put the cotton. We were dirt poor people. I ain't kidding. Growing up and walking, going, people can been here look back. When the sand blows, we didn't have a television, we didn't have a radio, and we lived over here on Austin Avenue, and that big old black cloud would come rolling. It was dirt. And Mama would holler, "Y'all get in here." And honest to God, we'd go in the house and sat on the couch or sat in a chair, and Mama would put pans of water around.
Is that right?
And the windows would be shaking all day. And she'd get us a wet rag, and you'd hold that wet rag in front of your face, and we had linoleum floor. And we'd sit there and watch that linoleum go up and down, that wind suction. And sat there, I mean, all day.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't go outside, you couldn't, and look at that. And Waylon, when he got away, he really did like Arizona. But many sandstorms would drive you crazy.
Oh, I bet.
They're bad now, but they're not near what they were back in them days.
Especially driving in that 57 Chevy.
We didn't have air conditioner, we didn't have TV, you just had to sit there. But
what
93 of them.
So for the Jennings family, where did y'all's ancestors come from?
We come from I'll tell you about it. We're Scott-Irish.
Okay.
Come on, Rick. There's a place over between Scotland and Ireland, and they call the people that are Scott-Irish. And that's where we originate, Irish and Scottish people. So
what generation of Americans were y'all? Like your parents were born here, right?
Well, my
Yeah.
My great-grandpa, and my great-great-grandpa Jennings, I'm not sure if they came from over there but here. And then on my mama's side, they were my great-grandpa, the one that shot the man in Oklahoma. He was born in Vegas, Tennessee. That's 60 miles north of Chattanooga. Well, after the Civil War, all the Southerners went to come to Texas and to Oklahoma, and that's how come he wound up in Oklahoma. Well, my great-grandma was a Choctaw Indian, and her mom and daddy carried her across on the Trail of Tears.
Really?
Into Oklahoma, yeah. And then my grandpa, great-grandpa, Alfred Blevins, his name's same as my grandpa. He found now this is my grandpa telling me these stories. He said his mama would tell them stories when they were growing up about how it was to live growing up as an Indian. They were Choctaw Indians, and she said that they pushed all the Indians on the Trail of Tears across to Arkansas, and they bring in kids and Indians into Fort Smith, and they would teach them English, how to talk English, and how to eat with a spoon. And trying to teach them the white man's way. And she said that they give them English names because they had Indian names.
Yeah,
you know? And I don't know what hers was, but anyway, the Brown was the name they give to her daddy. The last name was Brown, and her first name was Delilah.
Dang, that's amazing. Y'all were con pickers.
Well, my mama, I was too little, but I had to go we'd go to Cotton Patch, and Mama, of course, back then everybody, they brought all the kids would come, and only shade they was there was underneath that trailer, cotton trailer where they put the cotton. And Waylon and Tommy, they were big enough to pull a sack. Well, they had to pull cotton, like I say, they were 9 years older and 8 years older than I was, you know. Well, they was 12, 13, 14 years old. Well, they could pull a cotton sack and pull cotton all day. Well, I'd get underneath the trailer. We didn't have toys, but there's always a bunch of kids, and we'd get up underneath that trailer where the shade was and play in the dirt and fight, you know, just like kids did all day long. Mama told on Waylon once they got through picking cotton, and Mama said that Waylon, it was hot, he was sweating like everything. So he took that cotton sack, took that off of him, and threw it on the ground and said, "Mama, I didn't plant this shit and I ain't going to pour it. No,
was that
when he broke his leg.
So he broke his leg? Is
Yeah,
that what
well,
it was?
there was a piece of equipment they called a Go Devil.
Uh-huh.
And they would lay it, they were big old long, just, and it had, looked like railroad spikes.
Uh-huh.
That's what it looked like, them railroad spikes.
Yes, sir.
And you could pull a team and they'd drag them across the ground and, bust the ground up.
Uh-huh.
I think it was called Go Devil. Anyway, Waylon and some more kids is out there playing, and they would lean them up against the building or something to keep them from rusting, laying in the ground. And so they would lay them up, and they was climbing on it, and it fell over and broke Waylon's leg, and the doctor said it. Anyway, they found out later that he didn't get the bone to match up, and it was just a little bit off, and that's how come he limped.
That's why he had, like, when you watch him play, he looks like he's kind of leaning to the side.
Yeah.
Man. But, going on, about Waylon, did you ever go on road with him? Did you ever tour with Waylon?
I would. They come through here, going back into Nashville, and I decided to go back to Nashville. I got on the bus and went on back to Nashville. But yeah, I've been to a lot of the shows when they was unloading and loading and setting up and getting ready to go. But you think you want to do that all the time. You got the excitement, all these people in the crowds are coming. But you do it a couple of times and it's the same thing.
Yes, sir.
It's the same thing in Littlefield as it is in Lubbock, as it is in Big Spring. You meet different people, but you always, we were in Lubbock, in Dallas at a show, and I remember we back, me and my mom and all of us was there, we drove down, and you're always in the alley.
Uh-huh.
And we were laughing about it. And where the trash cans are, that's where they go in, and the dressing rooms are back there around the dress. And some of the places, not all the places that way. And I told Waylon, I said, I bet you get to see a bunch of back doors. He laughed. He said, I'm gonna tell you something. He said, if I can, he said, I'm gonna take some day and get on that bus and get me a driver and let him go back to these places that we played and see what the front door looks like. He said, I couldn't tell you what none of the front doors look like. It's always the alley, pulling in the alley and unloading and loading back. That's what I talking about. You were talking about would you like to go?
Uh-huh.
Well, them guys, them roadies, them boys working, you go ask some of them. After a little while, it's the same.
Yeah.
And people are hollering at you all the time and this and that. And which is, I come with everything, but after a while it just be kind of rough.
Yes, sir.
But you gotta love to do it. I promise you got to really love to do it. Music's got to be what you want to do, and that's all Waylon ever wanted to do.
Yes, sir.
Because if you don't got that in you, you ain't gonna go do it.
It takes a crazy man to do it, huh?
Yeah, you have to be crazy to keep people going insane.
Yes, sir. Well,
Waylon, I guarantee if he was here right now, he loved to sit around and just bullshit and laugh and tell jokes.
Yes, sir.
And when he was on that stage, and when he come off that stage, and if you see him at the cafe or at the truck stop or somewhere, he's the same old boy.
Yes, sir. Well, but before I ask you my last question, I just first of all I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Oh yeah.
My goal with all of this is kind of, since I grew up in West Texas, there's a music history here that not a lot of people I feel like know about.
Oh yeah.
I feel like all over the world people know about it, but here in West Texas, I feel like the younger generation, either they're never taught about it or they just don't know. And that's kind of my goal with this, is kind of talk with certain people about this area.
I've had people here, and I never did advertise. That's my telephone, and I don't own a computer. My computer's a number 2 lead pencil. I'm old school.
Well,
but when we put this story in, my wife, the EPA put me out of business in the station, so I had to pull my tanks, and so Littlefield got voted wet. And I told my wife, I said, well, I'm going to put it in a liquor store. And that's before they even built this room here for the museum. And she said, well, what are you going to call it? And I thought a little bit, and Waylon had that Waymore blues song, you know. And I said, well, hell, I'm going to call it Waymore. And so I come up with the Waymore. But people from Russia, Australia, New Zealand, England, Japan, China, I've had them from all over. I got a book back here, you can go in there and read them. I mean, before they find it. And had a call me from Germany. And the man said, we're coming to the United States for a tour. And we want to come to your place. And they said, I said, well, when? And they said, told me, and I said, well, I'm going to ride on the counter. And they said, now you will be there. And I said, yeah, I'm here all the time. I can't even get a hold of me. And sure enough, right on time, that big old bus pulled in. And 45 Germans on that bus.
Oh, man.
35 of them couldn't talk English.
Really?
But they could tell you anything you wanted to know about Waylon Jennings. I don't want driving the bus. He told me, he said, when people flew into San Diego, got on the bus, and they wanted to go see the Golden Gate Bridge, the Grand Canyon, and Waymore in Littlefield, Texas. I said, but they stayed here a half a day. They were really nice people. They really was.
Well, that's cool.
And then a man came in here from England, and you talk about Waylon being back yonder in the 50s. This boy was about 26, 7 years old, and he come with his daddy, and they came from England. They flew to Lubbock. We rented a car and come over here, and I got talking to him, of course, you know, and I said, well, who you got family, you know, over here in the United States? He said, no, we come to here. I said, you came from England just to come to Waymore? He said, my son thinks Waylon's the greatest thing that ever was. Well, he had, I mean, when Waylon was rocking and really going, this boy wasn't even born yet.
Yeah.
But anyway, that boy, we got to talking, and that boy got telling me about stuff, and I was talking with him, and he, on that telephone, he had everything that Waylon Jennings had ever done on that telephone. And his daddy told me, said he asked him, he said, he found out about the Waymores is over here in that museum thing back there. He said, wanted him to bring him here, so he flew him to Lubbock and rented a car and brought him here. And I said, well, that's pretty good, man.
Yes, sir. Well, you know, I feel like Waylon's legacy, it's still alive and well.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I think it amazes me, because since I am from here, you know, it makes me feel like if someone from here could, you know, can make it, you know, anyone here can.
And I talked to him on a Saturday, and they had cut off part of his leg. And he called me, and I could tell his voice was pretty weak. And I said, well, how you doing? He said, well, I'm doing better now. He said they had to go back in there and cut off a little bit more. And
excuse me, sorry.
I said, well, I said, I tell you what, I said, that ain't going down moving the leg. And he said, no, hell no. He said, it's going to be all right. He said, if I can get away from that wheelchair and that walker.
How are you today?
He said, I ain't quitting.
Yeah.
He said, I'm still going to go. He said, as soon as I get back up on my feet where I can get around, he said, I'm still going to go. And I said, well, you know, you get dealt a hand in life. And I said, you just got to play the hand you get dealt.
Yes, sir.
He laughed. He said, yeah, but he said, I'm still going to go. He said, told me, said, why don't y'all come out here? And I said, he said, I want y'all to come out here. They was in Chandler, Arizona, and I said, well, I used to have quite a few cows, and I said, well, I'm pretty busy right now. I said, a few days we get caught up. I said, we'll come out there. He said, well, we'll be looking for you, and I said, well, we'll be out there as quick as we can. Come to see you as quick as we can. Anyway, that was Saturday, and then he died on the Tuesday.
Yeah.
That Tuesday.
Well,
but he wasn't quitting. He was still going to get out on the way. I ain't quitting.
Yes, sir.
I'm still going to go.
Well, my last question I have for you, you know, Waylon being your brother, you know, I feel like growing up I've had great advice from my brothers, and just, you know, since, you know, you are the last of the brothers, is there something that Waylon told you or taught you that you still think about today or appreciate? Like, did he ever give you any brotherly advice on certain things?
The main thing is you do what you want to do.
Yes, sir.
You know? He said, yeah, he said, hey, you can do what you want to. Just, you know, you didn't have to just be your own self. You know, I guess the only thing I could have to think about.
Yes, sir.
That's what I did anyway. Well, poor people have to do what they have to do, you know.
That is true. Well, Mr. James, I'll look at the museum here in a second, but just to close out the interview, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And like I said,
yeah, I'm glad you came by, man. The guys beat me.
Thank you, and like I said, Waylon's legacy is alive and well.
Where y'all from?
I'm from Lubbock, so.
I mean, are you with the radio station or?
I'm independent. I'm kind of just doing this on my own, so.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
so,
you're welcome, man.
Well, like I said, I'll come back more often. I'll tell more people to come visit you.
Well,
so give you some business.
Sign our book when you go back there.
All right, I will. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.